And I started crowdfunding. I remember hitting my knees. We were scared. Me and my wife were scared. We just had a child. She's 2. She was diagnosed with autism, and suddenly I was unemployed over my vote. So we were scared, and we hit our knees and we prayed. And we'd never prayed before as a couple. I think I was an atheist when I worked at DC Comics. I was raised Mormon, but being around these people did something to me. And I stopped believing in God, but I believed in him then. And I hit my knees in prayer, and I prayed to God to just show me what to do. Give us the direction. Look after my family. Help me. Direct me. And we got up and we decided what we're going to have to do is do our own comics. I stood up and I just said, Comicsgate is not just a squabble. It's a group of people now. It's a group of people, creators who have been blacklisted for their conservative or Christian beliefs. It's a group of people who have aged out of comics for some reason and been replaced with talentless cat ladies and soy boys who have no idea how to tell a story and have no respect for these characters at all. They don't understand the craft of what we learned to do so well. And it's, of course, the fans who have been disrespected by all of these changes.
Hello and welcome to Culturescape, the show that interviews the geek creators and influencers that built our nerd culture. In today's episode, we are interviewing the one and only Ethan Van Sciver, a very successful comic book artist and writer, a crowdfunding champion, and a YouTuber with his channel ComicArtistPro Secrets, and an outspoken conservative critic of mainstream nerd culture on top of all that. As he's called often online, EVS spent almost 2 decades working as an artist for DC Comics, working on just about every prominent character for DC at one time or another, from Flash to Batman to the revival of Green Lantern to the ill-fated New 52. In 2018, Ethan decided to do his own thing, started with creating a comic with Jordan Peterson and reintroducing his old pre-DC creation CyberFrog, which has raised millions of dollars in crowdfunding and merchandise. Suppose you don't recognize Ethan for these feats. In that case, you may know his name as being attached to Comicsgate, a loose affiliation of creators and YouTubers that believe in sustaining the world of comics by creating the traditional content that mainstream comics companies have abandoned. This group is sometimes seen as heroic for some, and for others as villains, but as we will explore in this episode, whatever criticism many will have, their predictions about the collapse of the comics industry have come true. So please join us as we chat with EVS about his career, what led him to strike out on his own, and where he thinks the world of comics and nerdery is headed. Thanks so much, Ethan, for coming on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Hello.
So I like to do the show. For my stupidity, we scheduled this on Valentine's Day, so Ethan is a little short on time, but that's my fault. But I think this is going to be a good one. Usually for the episode, we do this chronologically, and I don't actually know all that much about the origin story of Ethan Van Sciver. So would you like to share with us a little bit about that?
Oh, well, I mean, when it comes to my career in comics, I started drawing CyberFrog at the age of 19. I worked on that until the end of the 90s. And then I worked at DC Comics and Marvel and really spent 20 years learning the craft, meeting people, learning about the industry. And rising up in the ranks pretty quickly. I was one of DC Comics' more popular artists. And in my brief stay at Marvel Comics, I worked on the X-Men with Grant Morrison, which is widely considered to be one of the best X-Men arcs, X-Men periods, I should say. I don't know if it's an arc. It's Grant Morrison's whole run, and I worked on a little bit of it. Much of the characters that I created there are still in use at Marvel. Mostly known at DC for Green Lantern and the Flash. I brought back Hal Jordan in his Silver Age greatness. I also brought back Barry Allen as the Flash. He was dead for 25 years, and I thought it was a good idea to bring him back. Hal Jordan and Barry Allen, two Republican, and that's a coincidence, I think. I hope it is. Out-Republican superheroes, which I think is a lot of fun that they let me do both of those.
Yeah, that they're never going to allow that kind of thing again.
They're still the most popular. I mean, look, they're trying to do a Green Lantern TV show, and they went all around, skipped all around how to not use Hal Jordan, how to use other Green Lanterns, rather than, the main one, the one that everybody knows from the Silver Age, the one that everybody loves, the one that was in the Super Friends, for goodness sakes. Barry Allen, too. I did get some pushback about bringing back the Flash from certain fans, but Barry is still the Flash was really kind of in a rut until we brought back Barry, and it's Barry who's in the TV show, the popular TV show that ran more than 10 seasons, and I think it was the right thing to do. It's Barry that's going to be in this terrible new movie that's coming out, and a lot of that is based on my work, so it should be interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was looking through just all the work that you have done. And it was surprising how many books you worked on, how many influential books you worked on, either that you became a big thing at DC or, like you were saying, led up to something like Flashpoint, which of course is one of the bigger hits DC's had in the last, now a decade. I think it's funny because Ethan, actually, he is known for creating several characters that today some might be called woke, including, I remember you made a Muslim. Was it for Marvel? I think it was.
Yeah, Marvel. We had a character named Dust, who was a Muslim girl who can turn into sand. I mean, that probably we would have gotten in trouble for that today. They would have said, so she's a woman from the Middle East and she turns into sand. I see. Isn't that a little bit on the nose? But the fact of the matter is, I get art credit, I get co-creator credit for Dust. I didn't have anything to do with it. Grant Morrison was steering that ship, and actually, I think Dust was from Mumbai. I think she was Indian. I don't even think she was from the Middle East. I think she was from Asia. But in any case, I did co-create her with Grant Morrison. I also have credit for Jessica Cruz, who is a Latinx. Is it Latinx or Latinx? What is it?
I think they moved on to something new. I know AOC used a new one. I can't keep track. It's like the terminology changes weekly.
Is AOC embracing Latinx? I mean, is she like agreeing to that? Because it really does seem like just white people are, enforcing this genderless language onto other cultures. They tried it with Filipinos. They called them Filipinks for San Diego Comic-Con. And they said, there's no Filipina or Filipino. It's not a gender. Just because there's a vowel at the end of it, it doesn't mean it works the same way. And we are not calling ourselves Filipinks, you idiots. And they got very upset about it. And they should, because it's just white people saying, words, your culture's nice and everything, but like the language is like a little problematic. It's gendered. Like, why do things have genders? Why do people have genders in the words? We've got to change that as soon as possible. And they end up tripping all over themselves, as they did, deciding that Filipino, and what's the language that Filipinos use?
I was going to say Tagalog.
Yeah, Tagalog. What a great word. It isn't gendered, evidently, from what I understand, because they were outraged by that whole thing. And good on them.
Yeah,
good on the Filipinos.
Yeah, my stepmom, she's Filipino. And that is not, they are not up to date on all the diversity initiatives. Some of the stuff her and her friends say when they get together for like a family gathering are not, they would get me canceled off YouTube. That's all I'm going to say.
No, it's just, basically white liberals enforcing their rules on the rest of society. It's, the temerity of it is astonishing.
When you started, you were kind of working there in the Chuck Dixon era, so to speak. Chuck Dixon, when he would work on projects, he was allowed to make more political comics sometimes, or at least comics that would have multiple points of view and include a more conservative one. And by the time you left DC in the main too, everything had shifted. What was that like? And what were like the first signs that something was changing in the world of comics?
Yeah, I don't even know if Chuck was there. Was Chuck still there when I was there? Maybe in the early part of my career, but I remember him ceasing to get work. I do remember that. I remember it being a thing, and I remember this whole thing, Chuck Dixon not getting any work because he said something homophobic. And then this guy who, did so much great stuff for DC and was so well known in what they would call the Bat Office, where all the Batman Gotham City stuff was being edited, was no longer getting work there. And maybe like our careers kind of overlapped a little bit, but I remember him being gone. And I remember also Orson Scott Card.
Yeah, how dare DC Comics have the temerity to offer him to do a single story in an anthology comic about Superman?
A short story. I was there. Understand, I was not aware of SJWs. I didn't know what was going on. I understood that everybody around me was a leftist, and I was a conservative. But I was able to work. I think most conservatives are just able to work with liberals, and we just roll our eyes at them. I didn't really have a problem with this, but I didn't understand what cancel culture was. I didn't understand any of this stuff, but everybody was throwing the biggest, girliest hissy fit over Orson Scott Card, who was already legendary, had a movie coming out starring Harrison Ford. This guy was, Orson Scott Card was a real writer who was kind enough to do a little bit of Superman work for DC Comics, and the entire industry had a conniption fit, calling him homophobic. He's Mormon too. I was raised Mormon, and they really resented him, and he stood tall. I can't remember if DC actually ended up publishing his story or not, but I remember my peers threatening to walk out, threatening to do all of these ridiculous things to protest the idea that this one man, who had actually accomplished some great things in science fiction, was going to get to work at our crummy little comic book company. It was unreal. And I remember being kind of like weirded out by that and thinking that could happen to me. I feel like that could happen to me because our politics are fairly closely aligned. And I think all Orson Scott Card did was come out against gay marriage and just say, marriage is between a man and a woman. It's a sacred thing between God and man, and no, two men and two women, or two women cannot. That's a religious thing. That's a religious perspective and point of view. And in order to maintain your religious views, you would be punished rather viciously and publicly scourged. It seems like in the funny. We make little funny books. Like, what is this? What is this rage? So that's I remember Chuck Dixon and Orson Scott Card early on being the victims of blacklisting and cancel culture. And I found it peculiar, but I really felt like it was never going to happen to me. Like, probably I'll just keep my head down for the most part. And I'm really popular. So why would I'm making them so much money. Why would they? That was my viewpoint. I was very wrong.
Yeah, that is one of the weird things that I have noticed. Just like the success of any individual artist or writer for these companies doesn't seem to matter in the equation if the person gets canceled or not, which, like, in your head, you're like, of course you would try to keep the people around who are making you money, but that's not how it gets treated.
No. And by the way, it's not a factor at all. People who consistently lose money, who are unable to sell any comics at all, are given preferential and protected treatment and status just based on their identity. And by identity, I mean their skin color, their race, their sexual proclivities, whatever those might be, or if they are disabled in some way, whatever it is, whatever they can hold up and claim to be society's victim in some way, that is going to get them preferential treatment, whether or not they actually can make a comic book that could sell to anyone. That is a key factor in success in current 2023 comic books.
I think what's interesting about your career in comics is you worked with a lot of the people that are considered comics today very lefties, very openly political. You worked, for example, on some issues with Gail Simone. I think her older stuff, I think, is better than her newer stuff because I think sometimes she falls into the popular pit of social justice. It is bizarre too to me. It's because people want to look at you as this political monster sometimes, at least from that worldview. But like, you worked with all kinds of different people with all kinds of different political preferences, and you were there in comics mainstream for 20 years. And then when people talk about you generally, sometimes someone like Bleeding Cool will like give you credit, like, EVS is a terrible human being, but he's still a great artist. But for the most part, they don't even seem to want to give you that anymore.
Yeah, they're starting to take that. You're not even a good artist. All the other artists don't like him very much. It's like, you know what? None of us like each other at all. Like there's a Mount Olympus of artists that everybody must respect, and that's cool. But I mean, when it comes to us, sort of workaday, kind of hard scrabble, creative people, we don't like each other's work, and that's just the truth. We're hard competitors with each other. But yeah, it was never a factor for me. I had a sense of humor about working with leftists. They called me a Nazi, and I thought they were joking, because how could they be serious? They'd say, we're all hippie socialists, and you're a Nazi. And I'd say, good one. That's hilarious. Yeah, very funny. And in fact, I rolled with it so well that I called my 2007 sketchbook My Struggle, because it featured a Sinestro character who was the villain from Green Lantern, in a new kind of costume and look and attitude that I was basing on Adolf Hitler. I wanted this villain to look really powerful, scary, heartless, and cruel. And so with that, and the fact that the book contained all of my early work leading up to today, and then also because my peers kept calling me a Nazi. And I don't hold any racist views at all. And I don't like racism. I really despise it. I find it to be disgusting when I encounter it. So those three things together made this comic book, or made the title of this book, My Struggle, very clever to me. But it was only seen as proof of my Nazism to my peers when they decided to completely flip their lids in 2016 and 2017. Look at this. See, he was hiding in plain sight all along. No, you guys have been calling me a Nazi since I started working here among you. But I can work with anyone. I work with these people because for me, it's about the comic books. I feel like no matter what our political differences are, we all love these characters. We all love these comic books. We want to make good comic books. And that's it. I'm here to make the widget. I work for this company. I'm here to make the widget that the company makes. But not everybody's about that. Not everybody. It turns out not everybody really is about that these days.
Yeah, it does seem like the priorities have shifted, and with that, a lot of damage has been done. So I want to ask you later maybe what was your favorite title while working at DC, but what were the first signs that you were seeing when you were working for the big two that things financially were not steady, or you started to see over the horizon that maybe the comics industry wouldn't be around forever?
Oh, well, I mean, gee whiz. What were the first signs of that? I remember many, many times just in my 20 years in the mainstream where the comic book industry was on the absolute brink of catastrophe, especially in 1998, 99. Things really, it looked like comics weren't going to be around for very much longer until Marvel Comics sold all of their properties to Sony all of a sudden to make movies. And that pulled them out of the depths of hell, and suddenly they had a little operating capital, but they were now owned. They were now owned by a parent company. Eventually Disney came in and swooped up the rest of them. And that saved them because comics were popular in the 90s based on the premise that they were all valuable. They were collectibles that would be worth something someday, and that just isn't true for everything. What the key thing to buying a comic book and having it be worth something is it has to be extremely scarce, or you have to be like the kind of guy who goes, what is this, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1? What is this, in the late 80s? And then pick that up like, this looks kind of funny. I think I'll grab a copy or 10 of this and stick them in a bag somewhere and hide them. Nobody thought Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was going to be anything, and that's why it's worth something now. That's why a copy of #1 is worth a couple $1,000, because nobody was looking for it. It was you'd have to be a very sharp-eyed person, and you'd have to be able to be prescient and realize that you were looking at a cultural icon happening here, being born on the indie comics racks. That's why. And all of the news articles, all of the news programs about comic books in the early 90s, the late 80s, were all saying people are just putting these comics away. Superman's going to be killed. And people are putting away copies of The Death of Superman. They're going to be able to put their kids through college. Comics are a big speculator business right now. And a lot of people believed in that and ordered way too many comics. The industry ballooned based on these imaginary sales, the imaginary audience, and then busted once people realized that the books that they had purchased weren't worth anything. So in the late 90s, it really seemed like it was at an end. And the comic book industry began to cannibalize itself. I remember every single comic book was featuring the almost pornographic death of one of the characters. The death of, on the cover, and then somebody holding a superhero's body crying. It's like, that's how they kind of pumped up sales. They got attention by killing these beloved characters all the time. It worked for Superman, maybe, 10 years ago. Maybe it'll work for all of these other characters. And they only start doing things like that when things are absolutely dire. And right now, instead of killing characters, they're making them all gay. Because, it's taken over. That's the trend. Like, now everyone comes out as gay, and their books just become sort of a gay rom-com book. Robin is, his comic book is almost entirely about whether or not he's going to kiss his boyfriend. And in fact, here's a front cover. Robin's kissing his boyfriend. The moment you demand it. Stanley would say, because you demanded it, on a blurb on the cover, and it would be like, the Thing fighting the Hulk. Because you demanded it, Robin kisses his boyfriend, right on the front of the cover. I don't know where is this audience? Who are we marketing these to? When you get a little news coverage, I don't think it translates to sales, but I think it suggests that things are desperate, absolutely desperate right now.
It's frustrating from my side because my understanding is, I don't know if you play a lot of games, Ethan, but it feels like they were relying on tricks and buffs to try to keep the industry going, but never actually having to reformat or do a deep dive and try to fix whatever was going wrong in the bottom layers. It feels like they were just kind of finding new ways to try, like you said, like we'll try to get someone really big to buy the rights to our comics, for a movie, or we will try to get, lots of news attention by doing this crazy thing. And it feels like that was the focus of what's been done the last 20 years, and they never actually got back to making, good comics, as that being the focus. And I know it's easy to say that, and it's like, it's like you could just make good movies, then you'd make money all the time. I understand it's difficult, but it feels like the problem with that trick was to keep going back to the well of trying to get those quick buffs. Is that kind of like, someone that is in the throes of an addiction, the drug that they use, the more they use it, the less the high gets. And so by now, I feel like we've had 50,000 coming out stories across all of comics.
That's
and
crazy.
It's like no one cares. It's none. Everyone just yawns.
And then what? Yeah, it's like, okay, so Superman's gay, and then what? And then he talks about it, and people hug him and tell him it's wonderful, and Superman gives him a hug and says, I always wanted a gay son, and this is great. Nobody argues with him. There's no conflict, no problem. Even the villains are accepting of him. This is very strange. It's almost like, well, why is this a story point? Representation is weird to me. I was thinking about this today because as I'm working on my own comic book, CyberFrog, if I went through and I really counted, we got, different kinds of people, survivors in the woods. It's very naturally diverse because it's taking place in New Jersey, where I grew up, and I grew up in a diverse kind of multicultural state, and all my schools were obviously fairly well mixed with different kinds of people. We had lots of Puerto Ricans, we had tons of Black people, we had Jews, and we had all kinds of different cultures, Italians that I grew up with. That's just the East Coast. So that's what CyberFrog looks like. And I just thought to myself, by the way, these characters, I'm treating them like they're people. But if I were looking at this as representation, if I went and I said, this little Black kid I have who has autism, who's in this book, I'm going to do something very awful to him that's going to hurt people's feelings when they read it, because it's a story. If I were doing this for representation purposes, It would mean that every single character I put in this story, I would identify them by their race, gender, sexual proclivity, and then that person would represent all of them. This character would have to represent Black people. How do you do that and still tell a story? How do you do that and create anything other than propaganda? How does representation work exactly? When you're somebody who's saying that this character in this story represents you because of your skin color or because of whatever reason, how do you tell a story that isn't going to be when bad things happen to this character, or when this character has foibles and flaws, when this character makes mistakes, when this character does something criminal or embarrassing, when this character does something that makes them fall down on their face? How do you exactly how do you get away with that and still say this is representation, this represents this entire group of people, without coming across as saying something about that group of people? I still don't understand how this works. I don't understand representation. I don't get why A, it's important, because I don't think it is, or B, why it's practical, why it works, and how it can be anything other than propaganda. How do you make it art? How do you do that? I've never seen it done. Every single one of these characters that is, this character represents Muslim women. This character represents Black lesbians in wheelchairs. Well, I mean, I can just tell from the list of descriptors and this person's pronouns that they're the most wonderful human being in the world. And this character's never going to do anything wrong, ever. It's not going to be that interesting to read. They're going to be validated by everyone around them all the time, including the writer and including the people who are reading about them. This isn't art. How do you do art like that? I resent it. I really do.
It's not entertainment either. And for those that they're trying to aim, or they're trying to here's the Black trans character. You're a Black trans person. Don't you love us? For most part, from some of the people I know, and even with my own stuff connected to disability, it doesn't feel like a plus. It feels like you're being pandered to. It feels hollow. Like, here's this perfect person in a wheelchair, and being in a wheelchair makes absolutely zero difference to their character. And for me, it's like, well, what's the point? Like, why even do this? They've overcome
it. By the way, this is the other thing. I think most kids who are in wheelchairs who are reading comics don't want to be in the wheelchair, and they don't want to read about people in wheelchairs. They want to read about Superman. They want to fly around with Superman. They want to run around with the Flash. They want to do all the things that super characters do. It's escapist fantasy. People don't want to be bogged down by the circumstances of their own lives. Every now and then they want to see something that says, I can relate to that. Peter Parker doesn't represent all white males. Peter Parker represents nerdy, awkward high school kids. And don't we all feel like we've been one of those, no matter what our skin color is? That's something that happens in here. That everybody, it doesn't matter what he looks like. That's something that happens in here. You don't have to change his skin color. You don't have to make him gay. I mean, it speaks to when you speak to somebody's heart and their personality and things like that, you speak to people on you speak to them with a much bigger megaphone as a creative person, as a storyteller, than when you pander to them based on the immutable characteristics that, of course they were born with, that they cannot change.
It's a mess, and the damage of this focus in the world of comics, it is really frustrating, because even me as not the hugest comic reader, at least not lately, I don't buy a lot of new comics anymore. Even from my point of view, it was just painful to watch, because you saw that the people who are interested in comics continued to dwindle, and it never felt like these companies were ever learning. Why did you decide that you wanted to go do your own thing, Ethan? Why did you decide you had to leave DC and go independent?
Yeah, I didn't decide that. It was decided for me by my peers when Trump was elected. It was decided for me because something was beginning to happen in the comic book industry, which other people called Comicsgate, which was normal people suddenly realizing that there was a real problem in comics creatively, that the focus had shifted away from good storytelling and towards diversity, inclusion, whatever. diversity, inclusion, equity, all these other buzzwords that really meant the destruction of storytelling and art. And on top of that, there was a new group of editors and people in comics who felt free to just unload their displeasure at the fans. And we were taught, not to do that. I was taught that fans are the customers and you don't talk to them that way. But this whole new group of what I call, and they called themselves SJWs, social justice warriors, who were out there fighting for, inclusion and representation in comics. They felt free to say the most horrible things to people, to the customers, and argue with them. And a retailer stood up at a Marvel Comics summit event in New York City and was angry with Marvel Comics. And he said, I depend on your product to keep my store open. We've got movies right now. Marvel Comics has Avengers and Thor and Hulk and all of these, Captain America, all these movies that are just Iron Man, that are fantastic, and everybody loves them, and they're all based on Stan Lee's original version. And people are leaving the movie theater, coming into my shop, and they're looking for Thor. And Thor is a blonde-haired woman now. Iron Man is a teenage black girl. And the Hulk isn't Bruce Banner anymore. He's a little Asian kid who kind of digs being the Hulk. The Hulk is a curse. You're not supposed to like that. All of these other things. It's like, I can't sell this. I can't sell this. And Marvel Comics just kind of said, we hear you. You don't like women. You hate people of color. We understand. We hear you loud and clear, but we're going to continue doing what we're doing because we think it's important. And at that point, the war was on. It was just on. And there was no arguing with Marvel. And somebody like me who was working at DC Comics, I heard all this loud and clear. I heard this constantly, and I was being told, even by my friends, that stay away from these crowds. Do not agree with them. Do not agree with the Comicsgate crowds, the voices who are, explaining these problems that are going on in comics, because it's going to be really bad for your career if you do. We're your friends. We understand you're hanging out with in live streams and listening to these messages. It's not going to be good for you if you continue to do that. I got messages like that, no exaggeration. And then when Trump was elected, and I was quite happy that Trump was elected, I voted for him. I'd love to vote for him again. People responded to me with outrage. I received a night letter from from a professional who I didn't actually know, who said, how could you have voted for Trump? Don't you care at all about your peers in the comic book industry who are queer? And I just thought, again, the narcissism, the absolute audacity of confronting me about my vote because you have your single issue, and that's entirely what you're basing your vote on, and not considering what might be important to me or my family. I must vote Democrat because there are some people in my workplace who are queer and who are afraid the Republicans are going to hurt them. Well, I don't think Republicans are going to hurt you. I think that's paranoia, and you're not going to emotionally blackmail me into my vote. I wrote back to him. I said, I guess I don't care. I care about issues that plague this country, that my family is concerned about. I care about my borders. I care about staying out of foreign wars. I care about, bringing trade back to the United States, and I care about the economy. And somewhere like 100th on that list is queer people being afraid that Trump is going to what? What do you think we're going to do? The idea of that is so insulting, to sit there and say to somebody who votes Republican that people who are gay are afraid if we take power and start making appropriate good changes for this country, that what are we going to do? What are you afraid of? Who do you think we are? Because at this point, I know who you are. At this point, I understand what your plan is. Your plan is to put people who disagree with you out of work and on the street. Your plan is to make them feel suicidal. Your plan is to do everything that you can do to demonize and dehumanize people who aren't concerned with social justice, who think that's a lot of hooey and a big scam. That's your plan. So I would tell all of my friends who vote Democrat, don't you care about anyone else? Don't you care about the 50% of the country that is on the chopping block, that is going to actually be hurt, Don't you care about people being destroyed, their lives being destroyed via cancel culture to appease these mobs of crazy people? I guess that's what I care about right now. More than anything, that's what I care about. I care about the fact that I ran afoul after 20 years of hard work doing beautiful comics that have helped DC Comics, comics that they still reference back to, characters that I've created for them that they own now and I do not, that I received a paycheck for, and that's it. I guess after 20 years of that, I was astonished that these left-wing bullies, these cry bullies, could get together and endeavor to destroy my life and attempt to really take all other options away from me. And they did it because nobody wants to listen to them. Nobody wants to oppose them. Nobody wants to stand up against them and say, no, shut up, get back to work. So I was a victim of cancel culture. And I hate saying victim. I don't want to be a victim. I'm a man. The last thing I want to do is be a victim. But I am. I was. And rather than do what they wanted me to do, which was curl up in a ball, disappear, and die, instead, I emphasized my agreement with Comicsgate and with the voices that were pointing out things that I now knew to be factually 100% true because they had completely changed my life. I stood up and I just said, Comicsgate is not just a squabble. It's a group of people now. It's a group of people, creators who have been blacklisted for their conservative or Christian beliefs. It's a group of people who have aged out of comics for some reason and been replaced with talentless cat ladies and soy boys who have no idea how to tell a story and have no respect for these characters at all. They don't understand the craft of what we learned to do so well. And it's, of course, the fans who have been disrespected by all of these changes. And that's what Comicsgate is. And that's what I belong to. That's what I believe in. And I started crowdfunding. I remember hitting my knees. We were scared. Me and my wife were scared. We just had a child. She's 2. She was diagnosed with autism. And suddenly I was unemployed over my vote. So we were scared and we hit our knees and we prayed. And we'd never prayed before as a couple. I think I was an atheist when I worked at DC Comics. I was raised Mormon, but being around these people did something to me. And I stopped believing in God, but I believed in the men. And I hit my knees in prayer and I prayed to God to just show me what to do. Give us the direction. Look after my family. Help me. Direct me. And we got up and we decided what we're going to have to do is do our own comics. So we're going to use crowdfunding. We'd seen other people use crowdfunding. I didn't understand it at all. We did a lot of research. My wife helped me. We chose to go with Indiegogo after Kickstarter politically discriminated against another Comicsgater. And we raised $500,000 on our first comic book. And then it continued to fund. And it ended up raising $1.2 million. This is unheard of money to us. CyberFrog Blood Honey.
Great comic.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And all the while, doing this, I was being scourged, beaten, whipped, called a Nazi, articles being written about me by the people who hated me, who got me canceled, had friends in the media who would write whatever they wanted them to. Those articles would be published by Miami Herald, Daily Beast, all these, Ethan Van Sciver, white supremacist, all of this nonsense. And then Wikipedia would use those articles as sources. So my Wikipedia results basically decry me as a monster and all of these things. I'm none of those things. I'm a husband and a father, a loving father. I'm an extremely talented, gifted comic book creator who's done comics that everybody loves, and I continue to. I really don't deserve this treatment, but I've learned that it is my fate. This is what my life is going to be moving forward for the foreseeable future. I'm going to do comics while rabid hyenas bite at me. That's it. I'm going to be called names. People are going to think I'm racist. I think they convinced the whole generation, the whole younger generation thinks I'm racist. I'm not racist at all, not a bit. But that's what I get, I guess. And for basically deciding to be a part of, devoting my life to this frivolous comic books. Who cares about comic books were my life. And because of that, like and the people who also agree with me that doing comics for a living, these people must be crazy too, just like me. This is what I get. I'm going to go down as a bigot and a racist. For what? For what did I do? So I'm very angry. I'm angry every day, and that anger fuels me. If I was, I'm content. I'm also very happy. Don't get me wrong. I have a beautiful wife. I live in a palace. I'm driving expensive automobiles. I have a swimming pool. I grew up dirt poor. I'm doing better than ever before. I have fans, more fans, people who know who I am and respect my work. I own my IP. I'm making toys, but I'm never going to forgive that, ever, as long as I live. And even though I'm a Christian and I'm supposed to forgive, maybe I will just before I die. Until then, I'm going to remember that my peers got together to try to take my livelihood away from me for good, and they won. And they labeled me a Nazi and a bigot, and they told people that I was a white supremacist. And I'm never going to forgive that, ever. They've come to me a few times and said, well, maybe we could. No, I'm not going to quit until, I've beaten you. I want whatever your social phenomenon is to be burned to the ground. It's evil. This is evil. Social justice is evil. And everything that they stand for is evil. I'm sorry, I'm going off on... This is why I have a YouTube channel. This is not why I come on to be interviewed by other people. These are one of my lectures and speeches, but...
no,
yeah.
it is fine. Look, especially when it sounds like this, when you got canceled, came at a very sensitive, worrisome moment. I can understand why that hurt, especially if, like, these people, when I had my own kind of mini episode cancellations, like, these people claimed to be your friends. They knew intimately who you are, what you were about, and that didn't seem to make any difference to them. So yeah, that does hurt. And I think even
every one of them turned on me, every single one, because not everyone. We still got Billy Tucci here. We've got quite a few other people who are keeping their heads down and still working within the industry, but people who I considered to be close friends, who knew my family, knew circumstances of my life, all turned, state's witness? What would you call that? Basically just turned over all this information about me. When I was getting a divorce and was at my lowest, I had a couple of friends who I would just, as Donnie Cates would say, I spiraled at them. Help, I don't know what to do. I need to talk to somebody. Divorce is a living hell. And these people just talked about me coming to them as friends and asking them for help, close friends, as though I was mentally ill and there was something wrong with me, failing to mention that it was over my divorce and I really needed help. It was awful. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about people. And I've learned a lot about people over the past 5 years that I never understood before. I think I was naive, but yeah.
I know what you went through was very painful, but in some ways, at least when I look kind of at the world of comics, this has turned into a positive, because what's happened is the mainstream industry has just fallen apart to the point where they can no longer pretend that they're still standing strong. You know how they used to, they would play with manga sales and Scholastic books, try to see those comics. They can't even play that game anymore. But the place where there actually are sales, and there does seem to be a growing dynamic, maybe it's not as big as the mainstream as a whole, but, Comicsgate has done remarkably well. You've done remarkably well. People that have followed your example, Eric July, just this last year, huge success. And it feels like Comicsgate, whether you hate them or love them, this seems to be a safe harbor where comics still can be made and loved and appreciated.
Yeah, that's what I want it to be. I mean, as I just said, I'm going to be remembered in a nasty way by a whole group of people, and I understand that. But I'm comforted by the fact that I've given my life over to Comicsgate. If my life can have any meaning, okay, if somebody wants to look back kindly on who I am and what I've done, I want it to be all about Comicsgate and the fact that I tore down barriers and made it possible for and taught people how to make their own comics. Because one of the big, terrible things about working in the mainstream is that people get old and they get aged out. It seems like everybody gets a 20-year career. Very few exceptions, but John Byrne got a 20-year career. It seems like much longer, and then he kind of burned out or aged out or whatever it was blacklisted probably in some cases. People suddenly realize that they're, 50 years old and they have no savings because they thought this was going to last forever. Well, I'm good at what I do. Why shouldn't this last forever? Well, because we've got this new crop of kids who wants to take your place. And suddenly these people are getting old and sick, and they have no insurance. They have nothing. They've lived like children their entire adulthoods, which is what happens when you're a comic book professional. And there's nothing to do. How do you fix that? You ask for money. You ask for help. You beg for charity. We don't have to do that anymore. We just don't have to do that. I mean, thanks to crowdfunding and thanks to, the internet, it's now possible for, people who are in their 60s and 70s who know how to do comics and still can do them and can create great stuff, to use crowdfunding and to use social media, to reach a wider audience. And it's not easy to do what you and I do, which is to talk to a lot of entertain people, get people's attention. It isn't easy, but I do that, and I'm happy to bring people on board, and we put on a little bit of a radio show. We have fun with each other. Sometimes we drink a little bit, and we just make jokes, and we have gags, and people fondly look to these comic book professionals and then buy their books. It's like I'm building a bunch of little Stan Lees who sell books, not just on their talent, but on their personalities, on their good traits, on the fact that people feel close to them. And it's working. It's working amazingly. People who couldn't get work before, who are Comicsgate and come on my show and have become friendly, fan-conscious individuals, creators. They're making six figures on their comic books. They're doing a comic book, 2 comic books a year, $100,000, $150,000 each comic book. Hey, you can live on that. I got news for you. That's a living wage. So that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. I want to do this. I don't want anybody to take this away from me because I think this is great. And if anybody objectively and honestly loves comic books, they'll see Comicsgate for what it is and not what it's lied about being. It is for people who love comic books and just want comic books to be fun again. And then for them to not be filled with a terrifyingly toxic atmosphere of conformity, a fear of your peers, terror of your peers. People are just keeping their heads down and trying to stay quiet so they can keep the work that they have. But it's a game of musical chairs. The industry's shrinking. What are you going to do? You're going to have to find something new. And we offer that way. We offer our, one way, a way that that we've come up with in order for comic books to continue to come out, find an audience, be self-sustaining, et cetera, et cetera.
So we're coming up to 10 minutes here. I guess the last 2 major questions I have is, 1, what do you think is going to happen to comics from here? And 2, how do you feel like these new GPT programs like AI art, how do you think that's going to affect the comics industry? Will that offer more people a chance to get into it, or will that be just one more death nail in the coffin of comics?
It's just so bad. Look, it's a great question. I mean, if AI does work its way into comics, that just means that everything that everybody ever learned how to do in terms of storytelling and craft, the sort of the love, the care, the mistakes, the wonderful mistakes, and the personality that goes into comic book artwork, obsolete. If people are actually willing to let artificial intelligence draw their comic books for them, that's it. I'm never going to accept that. I have no interest in anything like that. To me, like a comic book is, oh boy, I hope nobody else does either, but I don't know anymore. I'm not sure what people are into. To me, when I pick up a comic book, it's like I'm aware that there's a person or a group of people who are about to tell me a story. They're about to take me on a trip. And I sometimes usually I know who those people are. So I know if I pick up an issue of Superman, it's John Bogdanove drawing it, and Louise Simonson is going to be the writer, the storyteller. I know these two individuals, and I trust them to take me on a journey. And I'm excited to see what John Bogdanove is going to come up with visually. I'm excited about what ideas Louise has. And that to me is what comics are all about. AI means it's like the death of art. I don't know. I can't even imagine it. But if it does catch on, then yeah, it's bad news for everyone. And where are comics going to be? I don't know. I don't know how they seem untenable right now. They serve no real purpose. They're not entertaining anyone. They're not making anyone any money, really. I think their sole purpose is to virtue signal on behalf of their corporate parent companies, Disney, Warner Brothers, Discovery, as to what the corporate political, social stances are that they consider to be, I don't know, most advantageous to the company's perspective. I can't work under those circumstances. I don't know how anyone can. I don't want to speak for a company. How does a creator like Frank Miller get to do his, wonderfully like subversive comics if he's being published by Disney and therefore has to, Disney sees, his work as their, coming from their company? That it's not art. Comics needed to stay small, and it blew up. And then it had to get rescued by big corporations who stripped it of art and freedom. And that's where we find ourselves now. And it's too bad. Indie comic books, that's where it's at in the future. My comic book, I got a copy of it right here, of course. Look at this. Absolute beauty here. This is CyberFrog 2 Wreck Planet, the second edition. I make my comic books thicker. This is a 73-page story that will take you 2 sittings to read. I don't believe in just giving you 20 pages at a time. I put out a book. It takes me a long time. This is an installment of CyberFrog. This is the path towards survival for comics. We have to do things differently. Just has to be done differently in order for this to prosper and continue. Now shining. You can see yourselves in this comic, liberals. You want to see yourselves in comics? Look, there you are. You can actually see your reflection. But for the rest of it, it's mostly about, a frog and some extremely nasty bees, hornets from space. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I'm very proud of this series, of this book.
I guess quick question. When I was researching you, it did say that before you joined DC, you of course you worked in CyberFrog. That was your baby. At one point, you had a TV show and a toy deal. Is that true?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. CyberFrog was was it Mainframe? No. What was the company? I want to say Mainframe, or was that something? I don't remember. Anyway, the agency that represented the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and made it the phenomenon it was saw CyberFrog and said, we'll represent that too. And they did a great job. I was flown all around the country. I was about 22 years old or so. Couldn't believe my luck. They took me to a computer animation studio that was run by Dan DiDio at the time. So I met Dan DiDio before he was at DC, and they were going to do the CyberFrog cartoon. We had a toy deal with Playmates Toys that did the Turtles. They did a little prototype of CyberFrog, prototype of the toy I still have. Cool. And then it was going to be on Fox Kids. But it was great. I remember sitting down and having pizza with my agent, and he said, "Is there anything that you want me to do for you?" And I said, "Just make me $1 million." And he said, "Ethan, if I make you $1 million, I will have failed," because everything was lining up so perfectly. Well, what we didn't count on was that Playmates also had a contingent in Japan. And I was taking a nap one afternoon when I got a phone call from somebody who was terrified, who I just met at Playmates Toys. He was in his car and he sounded upset. He said, "I've just been fired. Japan came in and fired everybody. They cleaned house. They got rid of all the projects. So, of course, the deal with CyberFrog is over. I got to look for a new job." And that was it. So
that must have been a terrible day. That would have majorly sucked.
Yeah. Right. From there, I mean, Harris Comics was counting on, this is the whole thing. Nothing's really changed. You put out a comic book with these companies, and really they're not trying to make money from the comic book like I am. I'm trying to make money from my comic book. They're trying to make money from a toy deal, a TV show, a movie. That's what they're hoping for. And if that doesn't happen, this is just a shot at a Hollywood dream. If that doesn't happen, then that's it. The comic is canceled. The company just falls apart. And you're seeing that now. Tons of these companies who are hiring people who just see comic books as Netflix pitches, an easier thing to put in front of producers than a movie script. You get a comic book read. It's all there visually. Can't really get a movie script or a television script, screenplay read. So that's what comic books are now. They're Netflix pitches, movie pitches, rather than, comic books. A comic book is enough for me. I'd rather just do a comic. If this becomes a movie, great. If it doesn't, I don't care. It's all about the comic book, But that's the way the industry is hinging on that. People are like, they saw Mark Miller make a $50 million deal with Netflix. He's a guy who was writing Authorities, a bunch of stuff for X-Men, for Marvel. Started his own company, Kick-Ass. He had the Kick-Ass movies. And made $50 million. Now everybody's trying to be like him. Just focus on your comic books. For goodness sakes. We love comic books. This is an amazing, uniquely American art form. And it was invented here like jazz. We should be proud of comic books. We invented them. And we should be focused more on making better comic books because, again, Asia is just kicking our asses. Japan, we just lost 2 generations of comic book readers to manga. It's a shame, but it's our own fault. Not mine, though. I'm 100% innocent. Listen, I get up there, I enter the ring like I'm going for a KO every single time in the first round. I'm not messing around with my comics. I'm here to knock some people out.
Well, Ethan, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. I love your work, so it was pretty neat. I loved this stuff you did with Green Lantern, and especially the Wally West Flash stuff in the 2000s. I didn't necessarily recognize your name with that. That's my own fault. And then some of the stuff, I thought New 52, as ill-fated as it was, some of the better stuff that came out of it was what you had worked on with like the Green Lantern Corps and Sinestro and all that. So it's really cool to talk with you. I really appreciate that. I think you have created something that's really interesting, and it seems like this is where comics might find their saving grace. And as someone that loves the medium, that does make me happy.
Yes. All right.
Okay, so we'll end here. So where can people find you if they want to follow your stuff on social media or YouTube?
My YouTube is ComicArtistPro and then space secrets. That's the name of my YouTube channel. You can follow me at Ethan Van Sciver on Twitter. And from there, you'll find a whole wealth of links. All I use my social media platforms to make fun of SJWs, but also to sell comics. So I'll always be dropping links and saying, please buy my comics, please buy my toys. I got a toy line coming out, all of that. So once you're hooked into, once I've got you in my claws, you'll be able to find everything else. I'll make it clear to you.
All right. Okay, everyone should check that out, and also check out CyberFrog. If you haven't read that, any of the books, start with Blood Honey. They're very good. They're actually pretty high quality. I know sometimes with some of these independent comics, people say something, they say it's good, but it's not really. That's not the case with your work. It actually is pretty entertaining and fun. So I recommend
I can't wait
till
you read the second one, dude. Read Rec Planet and get back to me ASAP.
Will do. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ethan. You have a good night. And to all our listeners and viewers, until next time, my friends, keep geeking out.